The transformative power of kindness. Welcome to Life Tells Stories. Today, we present a heartwarming tale that reveals the power of one small act of kindness. Imagine owning a diner, struggling to pay your bills, and having to decide whether to help someone in desperate need, someone who has no money and nothing to offer in return. Would you do it? Would your empathy outweigh your financial struggles? Well, in this incredible story, we meet Sarah, a single mother fighting to make ends meet while running her cozy little diner. One stormy evening, a stranger walked into her life, and the choice she made that night would turn her entire world upside down. What did he leave on the table that changed everything? If you want to hear more real-life stories that remind us of the power of humanity, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Life Tells Stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an inspiring tale. Sarah had owned her quaint little diner for 5 long years. Nestled in a quiet corner of town, the diner was known for its faded red and white checkered curtains and its unmistakable warmth. But lately, times had been tough. With rising bills, fewer customers, and a struggling economy, Sarah barely had enough money to cover rent, let alone think about new school supplies for her 2 children, Max and Emily. Despite the challenges, Sarah pushed forward, working long hours, waking up at 4 a.m. every morning, and making everything from scratch using the recipes her grandmother had lovingly passed down. She was determined to keep her diner alive, but the fear of losing everything weighed heavily on her. Every day, after closing time, she would count the earnings with trembling hands, only to see that her efforts still weren't enough. Sarah's determination didn't stop her from feeling utterly defeated, especially on rainy days, when business seemed to slow to a crawl. And tonight, it was one of those nights. The forecast had been relentless, and heavy raindrops pounded against the windows as Sarah considered closing early. Little did she know, a chance encounter was about to change everything. Just as Sarah was about to lock the door, she heard the gentle chime of the diner bell. Her gaze lifted, and standing there was an elderly man, his clothes soaked, water dripping to the floor. He looked fragile, his hair disheveled, and his coat had noticeable tears. Though he looked embarrassed to be tracking water onto the clean floors, Sarah could see something in his eyes, a kind gentleness mixed with exhaustion. The old man, John, softly admitted that he hadn't eaten in 3 days. He'd lost his job recently and had spent his last dollars on medicine. With no money left, he was desperately in need of a warm meal. His vulnerability touched Sarah deeply. She remembered her first year in this country, the hunger she endured while saving every penny for her children. The memory was still raw. Without hesitation, Sarah guided John to a corner table, insisting that money wasn't an issue tonight. When he tried to refuse, she was already walking back to the kitchen to prepare something special, something that would bring warmth to his body and soul. Sarah knew that the best meals were the ones made with love, and tonight she intended to pour all her heart into the food she would serve John. She turned the stove back on, ignited the warmth of her grandmother's spirit, and decided to make her famous chicken soup. The vegetables were freshly chopped, the broth rich and savory, and she even added extra chicken. As the soup simmered, the cozy smell filled the diner, a comforting aroma that promised healing. She also baked a fresh loaf of bread to go along with it, and even packed some extra bread and cookies in a paper bag for John to take home. If tomorrow was going to be another hungry day for him, Sarah wanted to make sure he wouldn't have to endure it alone. Once the meal was ready, she served it to John as if she was serving her own father. The old man's eyes welled up with tears as he took the first spoonful of soup. He said softly that it reminded him of his mother's cooking, a taste from long ago that brought back memories of family dinners filled with love. As John ate, he began to share his story. He introduced himself as a former accountant who had worked with the same company for 30 years before being let go due to downsizing. He'd lost his job, His wife had passed away, and medical bills had drained his savings. Sarah listened intently, feeling a deep empathy for this kind stranger. She shared her own struggles, how she had moved to this country alone, lost her husband, and had to raise her 2 children by herself. She told him about her dreams for the diner, her hope that it would be a place of warmth, community, and stability. John listened quietly, savoring each spoonful of soup as if he were savoring every memory it invoked. Sarah noticed how, with each bite, the old man seemed to gain strength. His face, once pale and tired, now had a hint of color, and he looked more alive. When John finished his meal, he thanked Sarah for her incredible kindness. As she began to clear his plate, he reached into his worn coat pocket and pulled out a small notepad. With steady hands, he wrote something down, then left the folded note on the table. Sarah insisted he didn't need to leave anything, but John just smiled, quietly walked out the door, and disappeared into the rainy night. Sarah picked up the note, expecting it to be a simple thank you. What she found instead left her speechless. Sarah unfolded the note, her hands trembling. It wasn't just a thank you note. It was a business card and a handwritten letter. John had once been the chief financial advisor for one of the city's largest restaurant chains, and he had connections with influential figures in the restaurant industry. In the letter, John wrote that he had been observing her diner for weeks, admiring her dedication to quality and the care she showed every customer. He promised to return the next day, bringing with him potential investors. He had seen her commitment and her heart, and he knew she was the kind of person that his friends in the restaurant business would want to support. Sarah's heart pounded as she read the note again and again. Could this be real? Could her little diner, a place she had poured her entire soul into, actually be on the brink of a transformation? The next morning, Sarah arrived at the diner earlier than ever. Her hands were shaky as she baked extra bread, brewed fresh coffee, and polished every surface until it shone. She couldn't help but wonder, would John actually come back? Was this all just a dream? Around lunchtime, the door opened, and there was John, but he looked completely different. His worn coat and tired expression were replaced with a crisp suit and a confident stance. But his eyes, his kind, gentle eyes, were just the same. Behind him were a group of well-dressed investors, and they immediately began to inspect the diner. They ordered different items from the menu, nodding approvingly as they tasted Sarah's food. John walked around, pointing out the little details of the diner that made it unique. "This is where the magic happens," he said, smiling at Sarah. After their meals, the investors gathered around Sarah's counter. One of them spoke. "We want to invest in your diner. Our plan is to help you grow while keeping the soul of this place intact. We want to open 5 more locations across the city." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. Not only would her dream survive, it would thrive. The investors assured her that her grandmother's chicken soup would remain the heart of the diner, and everything she loved would be preserved. Within 6 months, Sarah's diner was transformed. They expanded into the empty shop next door, giving her more space, but keeping the cozy red and white checkered curtains intact. More staff were hired, relieving Sarah from the burden of working alone. Her 2 children, Max and Emily, were now proud helpers, learning their grandmother's recipes, just as Sarah had. The investors helped open 5 more locations across the city, each one carefully designed to feel just like the original. Sarah personally trained every new cook, sharing not just her recipes, but also the philosophy that every customer should feel like family. Sarah's favorite part of her new success was being able to give back. She hired people who needed help, single parents, struggling students, and others who, like her, were just trying to find their way. She made sure that no one left hungry, even if they couldn't pay. Her motto, "No one bleeds hungry," was now printed on every menu. John continued to visit the diner every week for his bowl of soup. He never mentioned that rainy night, but Sarah often caught him smiling as he tasted her cooking. Once he told her, "Your kindness wasn't just about the food. It was about dignity. You treated me with respect when I had nothing. That's what makes you and this diner special." Sarah framed the note John left that night and hung it in her office, a reminder that one small act of compassion could transform not just one life, but many. It became a symbol of what her diner stood for: kindness, warmth, and the belief that every single person deserves to be treated with love and respect. Sarah's story teaches us that kindness has a way of coming back to us in ways we never expect. A single meal offered to a stranger turned into an opportunity of a lifetime, not just for Sarah, but for everyone around her. It's a reminder that the smallest act of generosity can have a ripple effect, changing countless lives. If this story touched your heart, make sure to tap that like button. Share it with someone who might need a little inspiration, and subscribe to Life Tells Stories for more incredible real-life tales that remind us of the power of humanity. Remember, kindness costs nothing, but its rewards are immeasurable. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.